The knock came at 7:03 p.m. Sharp and deliberate, cutting through the chaos of unpacked boxes and my racing thoughts. I froze. A half-opened cardboard box spilling books across the hardwood floor of my new living room. Who knocks on a stranger's door the second they move into a sleepy Ohio suburb? I'd barely set foot in Willow Creek, a town so small it felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. My name's Ethan Caldwell, 27, freshly single, and running from a life in Chicago that had crumbled under the weight of a breakup I didn't see coming. This house, modest, with creaky floors and a porch that sagged just enough to feel honest, was my chance to start over. But that knock, insistent and unyielding, felt like the past chasing me down. I opened the door, and there he was, a man about my age, maybe a year or two older, with tousled brown hair and a face that looked like it carried too many stories. His name was Lucas Harper, my neighbor, and his first words were, "You're gonna need this." He held out a small, leather-bound journal, its edges worn like it had been carried through a war. His voice was steady, but his eyes hazel, sharp, almost pleading, betrayed something deeper. "I'm sorry." "What?" I asked, my hand hovering over the journal but not taking it. I'd been in town for 6 hours, and already someone was handing me cryptic gifts. Lucas didn't smile, didn't break eye contact. "Just take it," he said. "Read it tonight. Alone." Then he turned and walked back to his house across the street, leaving me standing there, journal in hand, with the distinct feeling I'd just been handed a bomb. That night, I sat on my couch, the house too quiet, the journal heavier than it should have been. I opened it, expecting a neighborly welcome note or maybe a quirky town history. Instead, the first page was a letter, written in tight, careful script, addressed to me. Not new neighbor or resident, but Ethan. My name. My heart stuttered. How did he know? I hadn't told anyone in Willow Creek who I was, not even the realtor. The letter began, "If you're reading this, you're already part of it. I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice." The words sank into me like cold water. Part of what? I flipped through the pages, my pulse climbing. The journal wasn't a diary, it was a confession. Lucas had written about a secret he'd been carrying for years, something that had torn his life apart in this very town. He wrote about being gay in a place where whispers turned into fists, about a love he'd lost to fear and shame, and about a promise he'd made to someone he'd never see again. Every page was raw, jagged, like he'd bled the words onto the paper. And somehow, I was now tangled in it. I didn't sleep that night. The journal sat on my coffee table, its presence louder than the creaks of the old house. Why me? Why now? I'd come to Willow Creek to escape drama, not to inherit someone else's. But Lucas's words clung to me, especially one line, "If you stay, you'll have to choose silence or truth." I didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a warning. The next morning, I saw Lucas through my kitchen window, watering his garden. He looked ordinary, almost too normal for the weight of what he'd shared. I wanted to march over, shove the journal back into his hands, and demand answers. But something stopped Mimab, the way his shoulders slumped, or the way he glanced at my house, like he was waiting for me to make a move. I spent the day unpacking, trying to shake the unease. Willow Creek was picture perfect, neat lawns, kids on bikes, American flags flapping in the breeze. But the journal made it feel like a stage set, hiding something darker. By afternoon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed the journal and crossed the street to Lucas's house. My knock was harder than I meant it to be. He opened the door, and for a second, we just stared at each other. "Why me?" I asked, holding up the journal. "Why'd you give me this?" Lucas stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "Because you're like me," he said quietly. "I saw it in you yesterday. The way you looked at this place. Like you're running from something. I've been there." My stomach twisted. I hadn't told anyone in Willow Creek I was gay, not the movers. Not the nosy cashier at the grocery store. I'd learned to keep it quiet after years of sidelong glances and whispered slurs in Chicago. But Lucas saw through me in a single glance. "You don't know me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I don't have to," he replied. "But I know what it's like to hide. And I know what happens when you stop hiding in a town like this." He paused, his eyes searching mine. "Read the rest of the journal, Ethan. Then decide if you want to stay." I went home, my head spinning. The journal wasn't just a story, it was a map of Lucas's life. And maybe a warning for mine. I didn't know if I was ready to follow it, but I couldn't look away. That night, I read on, each page pulling me deeper into Lucas's world, a world of love, loss, and a secret that could change everything. The journal's pages felt heavier with every turn, like they were pulling me into a story I wasn't sure I wanted to live. Lucas's words painted a vivid picture of Willow Creek 10 years ago, when he was barely 20, caught in a love that felt like salvation and damnation all at once. His name was Caleb, the boy who'd stolen Lucas's heart, a quiet kid with a laugh that could light up the darkest corners of this town. Lucas wrote about stolen moments, late-night drives down empty country roads, hands brushing in the shadows of the old mill, promises whispered under the stars. But Willow Creek wasn't kind to boys like them. The town's church, with its towering white steeple, cast a long shadow over their love. Lucas described the whispers that started at Sunday sermons, the way eyes followed them at the diner, the notes slipped under Caleb's door with words too vile to repeat. I could feel Lucas's fear through the ink, his desperation to hold on to something the world wanted to rip away. I stopped reading, my chest tight. I'd known that kind of fear. Different city, same story. In Chicago, I thought I was free, out and proud with my ex, Jamie. But freedom came with a cost, the snide comments at work, the cold shoulders at family dinners, the slow erosion of a relationship that couldn't withstand the pressure. I'd moved to Willow Creek to escape that weight, but Lucas's journal was dragging it all back. The next day, I avoided my front porch, afraid I'd see Lucas and have to face the questions burning in my mind. Instead, I walked into town, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. Willow Creek's main street was a postcard, a bakery with warm lights spilling out, a hardware store with a faded sign, kids laughing by the ice cream shop. But now, every smile felt like a mask. Were these the same people who'd driven Caleb away? Were they watching me now, sizing up the new guy? At the coffee shop, I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, the journal tucked in my bag like a guilty secret. The barista, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Maggie, lingered as she handed me my cup. You're the new guy on Maple Street, right? She asked, her voice warm but curious. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Just moved in. Welcome to Willow Creek, she said, but her eyes flicked to my bag, like she knew what was inside. Folks here are friendly, but they've got long memories. Be careful what you stir up. I nodded, my throat dry, and left the shop. Her words echoed Lucas's warning, silence or truth. What did they know that I didn't? Back home, I dove back into the journal, unable to stop myself. Lucas wrote about the night everything fell apart at town hall meeting where Caleb's name was dragged through the mud, accused of corrupting the community. Lucas had stood in the back, silent, too afraid to speak. Caleb left town the next day, and Lucas never saw him again. The guilt in Lucas's words was suffocating. He blamed himself for staying quiet, for letting fear win. But the journal wasn't just a confession, it was a plea. The final page I read that night ended with a question. If you had one chance to fix a mistake, would you take it? Even if it cost you everything. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Lucas wasn't just sharing his story, he was asking me to do something about it. But what? I barely knew him, barely knew this town. Yet every word he wrote felt like it was written for me, like he'd seen my own regrets and held a mirror to them. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. No signature, just a single line in Lucas's handwriting. Meet me at the mill tonight. 9 p.m. My heart raced. The mill was where Lucas and Caleb had hidden their love, a crumbling relic on the edge of town. I didn't know what Lucas wanted, but I knew I couldn't ignore him. Not anymore. That evening, I drove to the mill, the journal in my passenger seat like a silent passenger. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and river water. Lucas was already there, leaning against a rusted beam, his face half lit by the moon. You read it, he said. Not a question. Yeah, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me, Lucas? He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto mine. Caleb's coming back, he said. Tomorrow. And I need your help to make things right. My breath caught. Caleb, the ghost who haunted every page of that journal, was real. And he was coming back to a town that had broken him. I didn't know what Lucas was planning, but I knew one thing. I was already in too deep to walk away. The mill's shadows seemed to swallow Lucas's words, but they echoed in my head. Caleb's coming back. I stood there, the journal clutched against my chest, the weight of his request pressing down on me. Why me? I asked again, my voice cracking. I'm nobody here. I just moved in. Lucas's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked away, staring at the river glinting beyond the mill's broken walls. Because you're not nobody, he said finally. You're the first person in 10 years who didn't look at me like I was broken. You're like me, Ethan. And Caleb needs that. He needs someone who gets it. I wanted to argue, to tell him I wasn't some hero ready to fix his past. I'd come to Willow Creek to hide, to rebuild my life after Jamie left me with nothing but a note and a half-empty apartment. But Lucas's eyes held mine, and I saw something I hadn't in years trust. He wasn't just asking for help. He was begging for it. What do you need me to do? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Lucas exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for a decade. Caleb's been gone 10 years. He said. He's coming back to face the town, to tell his truth. But he can't do it alone. I need you to stand with us, to show this place that we're not afraid anymore. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Not afraid. Lucas, I've been afraid my whole life. You think I'm ready to walk into some small-town showdown? You don't have to be ready, he said. You just have to show up. He told me the plan. Caleb was returning for the town's annual festival, a big event where everyone gathered at the community center. He wanted to speak there, to tell his story about the love he and Lucas had, the hate that drove him away, and the strength it took to come back. Lucas wanted me there, not just as support, but as proof that people like us could exist in Willow Creek without hiding. I drove home in a daze, the journal's pages flashing in my mind. Lucas's love for Caleb was so raw, so real. It made my own past feel small. Jamie and I had loved each other, but it was a city love fast, fleeting, fragile. Lucas and Caleb's was something else, forged in fire and broken by it. I envied it, even as it scared me. The next day, the festival buzzed through Willow Creek like a living thing. Banners hung across Main Street. Kids ran with balloons, and the smell of fried dough filled the air. I walked through the crowd. My stomach knotted, searching for Lucas. I found him near the community center, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his face pale but resolute. Beside him stood a man I knew instantly was Caleb. He was taller than I'd imagined, with dark hair and eyes that carried a quiet strength. He looked like someone who'd been through hell and come out sharper for it. Ethan, Lucas said, his voice steady. This is Caleb. Caleb extended a hand, his grip firm but warm. Lucas says you're one of us, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Thanks for being here. I nodded, unsure what to say. The crowd around us felt like a tightening noose. I recognized faces from the coffee shop, the grocery store, the hardware store. Were they the ones who'd driven Caleb away? Were they watching us now, waiting for us to slip? The community center was packed, the air thick with chatter and the hum of anticipation. Lucas, Caleb, and I stood at the back, waiting for the open mic portion of the night. The mayor droned on about town pride, and I felt Lucas tense beside me. You okay? I whispered. No, he said, his voice low. But I have to do this. When the mic opened, Caleb stepped forward first. The room fell silent, every eye on him. He didn't flinch. My name's Caleb Monroe, he began, his voice clear and strong. 10 years ago, this town told me I didn't belong. I'm here to tell you I do. He spoke about Lucas, about their love, about the hate that tore them apart. He didn't accuse, didn't shout, just laid out the truth, raw and unapologetic. I watched the crowd, saw some faces soften, others harden. Maggie, the barista, wiped a tear from her cheek. An older man in a flannel shirt stormed out. When Caleb finished, Lucas took the mic. I stayed silent once. He said, I let fear win. I'm not doing that again. He looked at me, and my heart stopped. Ethan, you're new here, but you're part of this now. Will you say something? Every instinct screamed at me to run. I wasn't ready for this. Wasn't ready to bare my soul to a room full of strangers. But Caleb's courage, Lucas's trust, they anchored me. I stepped to the mic, my hands shaking. I'm Ethan Caldwell, I said. I moved here to start over. I didn't expect to find this. But I'm here, and I'm not hiding who I am. Not anymore. The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Maggie. Then another. And another. Not everyone joined, but it was enough. I stepped back, my legs weak, and Lucas's hand brushed Manea's small, electric touch that felt like a lifeline. The applause faded, but the weight of what we'd done lingered in the air like smoke. I stood with Lucas and Caleb at the back of the community center, my heart still pounding from speaking words I'd never dared say aloud. The crowd dispersed, some casting curious glances, others avoiding our eyes entirely. I felt exposed, like I'd peeled back my skin and let Willow Creek see the raw truth underneath. Lucas's hand lingered near mine, not quite touching but close enough to feel its warmth. You did good, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Caleb nodded, his eyes bright with something like pride. But the moment was cut short by a voice sharp, cold, and familiar. Lucas Harper, you've got some nerve. It was the man in the flannel shirt who'd stormed out earlier. He stood in the doorway, his face red, his fists clenched, dragging this filth back into our town. Caleb stepped forward, calm but unyielding. This is my home, Mr. Dawson. Same as yours. Dawson spat on the floor. Not after what you did. You and him, he jabbed a finger at Lucas, you're a disgrace. The venom in his voice hit me like a punch. I'd heard it before. In different words. Different places. But here, in this small room, it felt sharper. More personal. Lucas's face didn't change, but I saw his hands tremble. We're not hiding anymore, Dawson, he said. You don't get to decide who belongs. Dawson sneered, but before he could respond, Maggie stepped between them. That's enough, Tom, she said, her voice firm. This isn't your town to gatekeep. Let it go. The room watched, tense, as Dawson glared, then turned and left, the door slamming behind him. Maggie turned to us, her expression soft but fierce. You boys did something brave tonight. Not everyone's ready for it, but some of us are. She squeezed Caleb's shoulder and walked away, leaving us in a fragile bubble of relief. Outside, the festival lights twinkled, oblivious to the storm we'd just weathered. Caleb and Lucas walked me to my car, the night air cool against my skin. Thank you, Ethan, Caleb said. I didn't expect anyone to stand with us. I didn't expect to, I admitted, and we all laughed. A small release of tension. But as I drove home, the weight of Dawson's words clung to me. I'd spoken my truth. But at what cost? Willow Creek wasn't Chicago. There was no anonymity here. No place to blend into the crowd. The next morning, I found a note taped to my mailbox. Fags don't belong here. The word hit like a slap. Crude and ugly. I tore it down, my hands shaking. and looked across the street. Lucas was on his porch, watching me. He crossed the street in seconds. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes on the crumpled paper in my hand. "No," I said, my voice tight. "But I'm not running." He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. "Come inside," he said. "We need to talk." In his living room, Lucas poured coffee, his movements deliberate, like he was stalling. "Caleb's staying with me for a few days," he said. "He's got a place lined up in Columbus, but he wants to settle things here first." "What happened last night? It's just the start." "Settle things how?" I asked, the note still burning in my pocket. Lucas sat across from me, his eyes steady. "Caleb's writing a letter to the town paper. He's naming names people like Dawson who made his life hell. He's not accusing, just telling the truth. But it's going to stir things up." I leaned back, my mind racing. "And you want me to, what? Co-sign it?" "No," Lucas said. "I want you to stay. To be here when the fallout comes. Because it will." I wanted to say no, to pack my boxes and leave Willow Creek behind. But Lucas's journal, his story, Caleb's courageous'd hooked me. And then there was Lucas himself. The way he looked at me, like he saw more than the scared guy who'd fled Chicago. There was something between us, unspoken but growing. And it terrified me as much as it thrilled me. That afternoon, Caleb joined us, and we sat around Lucas's kitchen table, drafting the letter. Caleb's words were careful but unflinching, recounting the hate he'd faced and the love he'd lost. I added a few lines about my own experience, about choosing truth over silence. It felt like signing a contract with no fine print. No way to know what I was agreeing to. We sent the letter to the Willow Creek Gazette that evening. By the next morning, it was printed. Front page. Bold as a scream. The town erupted, some in support, others in fury. My phone buzzed with texts from numbers I didn't know. Some kind, some vicious. Lucas's mailbox was stuffed with letters, and Caleb's car was keyed outside the diner. But something else happened, too. Maggie stopped by with a casserole and a hug. A teenage girl left a note on my porch. "Thank you. I'm not alone anymore." Slowly, quietly, people were listening. And in the middle of the chaos, Lucas reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. It was the first time we'd touched, really touched, and it felt like a promise. The letter in the Gazette was like a match dropped in dry grass. Willow Creek was ablaze with whispers, arguments, and uneasy silences. I walked to the diner the next morning, the air thick with tension, every glance from a passerby feeling like a judgment. Lucas and Caleb were already there, tucked in a corner booth, their heads bent over coffee cups like they were plotting a revolution. I slid into the booth, my heart still racing from the note I'd found on my porch that morning. Not hate this time, but hope. That teenage girl's words, "I'm not alone anymore," had lodged in my chest, a reminder of why we'd done this. But the keyed scratches on Caleb's car and the venomous texts on my phone were reminders. Took the cost. "People are talking," Caleb said, his voice low but steady. "More than I expected. Some are angry, but others, they're listening." Lucas nodded, but his eyes were on me. "You okay, Ethan?" You look like you haven't slept. I haven't, I admitted. This town's starting to feel like a minefield. He reached across the table, his hand brushing mine for a momenta fleeting anchor. You don't have to stay in the fight, he said. You've already done more than I could have asked. But I was in too deep. The journal, the festival, the letter, it wasn't just their story anymore. It was mine. I thought of Jamie, how I'd let our love slip away without a fight, too afraid to face the world's judgment. I wasn't making that mistake again. That afternoon, we met at Lucas's house to plan our next move. The Gazette had printed a follow-up, a call for a town meeting to discuss community values. It was a trap. We knew Dawson and his crowd would be there, ready to tear us down. But Caleb saw it as a chance. We show up, he said. We keep talking. If we back down now, they win. I nodded, but my stomach churned. I wasn't like Caleb, with his quiet steel, or Lucas, with his stubborn heart. I was just Ethan, the guy who'd run to Willow Creek to hide. But Lucas's hand found mine again, under the table this time, and I felt something shift, a spark of courage, or maybe something more. The town meeting was held in the high school gym, the air thick with sweat and tension. Rows of folding chairs were filled with faces. I was starting to recognize Maggie, the supportive barista, Dawson, glowering in the front, the teenage girl from the note, sitting nervously with her parents, Lucas, Caleb, and I stood near the back, a united front, though my knees felt like they might give out. The mayor opened the meeting, his voice smooth but uneasy. We're here to discuss what makes Willow Creek a community, he said. Recent events have stirred debate, and we want to hear all sides. Dawson was the first to speak, his voice booming. This town was built on family values, he said. What these boys are pushing, it's not who we are. It's a sin. Plain and simple. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. I felt Lucas tense beside me, but Caleb stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. This town is my home, he said. I left because I was told I didn't belong. I'm back because I know I do. Love isn't a sin, it's what makes us human. The room went quiet, the weight of his words settling over everyone. Then Maggie stood. Caleb's right, she said. I've served coffee to every one of you, and I've seen how this town treats people who are different. It's time we did better. One by one, others spoke, some in support, some against. The teenage girl, her voice shaking, said, I'm gay, and I'm scared every day. But seeing them, she pointed to us, gives me hope. Her mother pulled her close, tears in her eyes, and I felt my own throat tighten. Lucas spoke last, his voice raw. I lost Caleb once because I was afraid. I won't lose anyone else to fear. Not this town. Not myself. He looked at me, and I knew he wasn't just talking about Caleb. The meeting ended with no resolution, just a fractured town forced to face itself. As we left, Lucas's hand found mine again, this time in full view of the crowd. A few people stared, but others like Maggie and the girl smiled. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was a start. Back at Lucas's house, we sat on his porch, the night quiet except for the crickets. Caleb was leaving for Columbus in the morning. His mission in Willow Creek done for now. "You two take care of each other," he said, his eyes warm but tired. "This place needs you." After Caleb went inside, Lucas and I stayed on the porch, the air heavy with unspoken words. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "But you did." "You didn't have to knock on my door," I replied. "But you did." He laughed, soft and real, and leaned closer. Our shoulders brushed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Willow Creek was still a battleground, but with Lucas beside me, it felt like a fight worth having. Caleb left for Columbus the next morning, his car packed with the weight of 10 years and a fragile hope for Willow Creek's future. I watched him drive away from Lucas's porch, the journal still tucked under my arm like a talisman. Lucas stood beside me, silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon where Caleb's car disappeared. "He'll be okay," I said, more to convince myself than him. "He always is," Lucas replied, but his voice was heavy. "It's this town I'm worried about." We spent the day fielding reactions to the town meeting. Maggie called to say the diner was buzzing with talk, some good, some ugly. The Gazette ran an editorial praising our courage, but urged the town to move forward together, whatever that meant. My mailbox had another note. This one, Kinder, keep going. You're not alone. I showed it to Lucas, and he smiled. A rare, unguarded moment that made my chest ache. That afternoon, we walked through town, bracing for stares or worse. Instead, we got nods from strangers, a hesitant wave from the hardware store owner, even a shy smile from the teenage girl from the meeting. But not everyone was warming up. Dawson and his friends lingered outside the church, their eyes tracking us like hawks. I felt Lucas's hand brush mine, a silent defiance, and I didn't pull away. At home, I finally unpacked the last of my boxes, trying to make this house feel like mine. Lucas came over, bringing pizza and a six-pack, a small gesture that felt like a lifeline. We sat on my couch, the journal between us, and talked not about Caleb or the town, but about ourselves. Lucas told me about growing up in Willow Creek, the only child of parents who loved him but never understood him. I told him about Chicago, about Jamie, about the nights I'd spent wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. "You're not broken, Ethan," Lucas said, his voice soft but sure. "You're just you. And that's enough." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man behind the journal scarred, stubborn, and so damn alive. I wanted to kiss him, to close the distance between us, but fear held me back. Not fear of the town, but of myself falling too fast, too hard, for someone who'd already turned my world upside down. The next day, the town felt quieter, like it was catching its breath. Lucas and I met Maggie at the coffee shop, where she slid us free pastries and a knowing smile. "You too are trouble," she said, but her eyes were warm. "Keep it up." Trouble found us soon enough. That evening, as we walked back to Maple Street, a truck slowed beside us, Dawson's face glaring from the driver's seat. "You think you can change this town?" he shouted. "You're nothing but a mistake." Lucas grabbed my arm, pulling me back as the truck sped off. "Ignore him," he said, but his voice shook. I didn't ignore it. I couldn't. Dawson's words were a mirror to every doubt I'd ever had. Every whisper that told me I didn't belong. That night, Lucas stayed over, crashing on my couch after we talked until midnight. I lay awake, thinking about his hand in mine, about the fight we were in, about the line between fear and courage. The next morning, I found him in my kitchen, making coffee like he belonged there. "We need a plan," he said. "Dawson's not going to stop, and neither are the others like him." He was right. Over breakfast, we sketched out ideas, community events, open forums, maybe a support group for kids like that teenage girl. It felt naive, almost impossible, but Lucas's determination was infectious. "We don't have to win everyone over," he said. "Just enough to make a difference." We started small, hosting a barbecue in my backyard for anyone willing to come. Maggie showed up with her wife, a quiet woman named Sarah who hugged us both. The teenage girl, Lily, came with her mom, who admitted she was still learning but wanted to try. A few others trickled in, neighbors, a teacher, even the hardware store owner. It wasn't a revolution, but it was something. As the sun set, Lucas and I stood on my porch, watching the small crowd laugh and talk. His shoulder brushed mine, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I took his hand, my heart racing but steady. "Your trouble," I said, echoing Maggie. He grinned, his eyes bright. "You have no idea." That night, we kissed for the first time, under the porch light where he'd first handed me the journal. It was soft, tentative, but it felt like a beginning. Willow Creek was still a battleground, but with Lucas beside me, I was ready to fight not just for him, but for myself. The kiss lingered in my mind, a quiet revolution that felt bigger than anything we'd done at the town meeting. Lucas and I were something now, undefined but real, and every touch his hand brushing mine. His smile across the breakfast table felt like a promise we were still learning to keep. But Willow Creek wasn't ready to let us rest. The barbecue had been a small victory, a crack in the town's armor. Lily, the teenage girl, started coming by my house after school, sharing her fears and dreams over cups of tea. Her mom, Karen, joined us sometimes, her questions awkward but earnest. Maggie and Sarah became regulars, too, their laughter filling my living room like a shield against the hate still simmering outside. But Dawson and his allies weren't done. A week after the barbecue, my front lawn was trash cans tipped over. Spray paint scrawled across my mailbox, "Leave." Lucas found me cleaning it up at dawn, my hands shaking with anger and exhaustion. "This is my fault," he said, grabbing a sponge to help. "No," I said, sharper than I meant. "It's theirs, and I'm not going anywhere." He looked at me, his eyes soft but fierce. "Neither am I." We reported the vandalism to the sheriff, a gruff man named Hargrove who took our statement with a sigh. "I'll look into it," he said, but his tone told me not to expect much. Still, he surprised us by showing up at Lucas's house later that day. "Got a lead on the paint," he said. "Kids? Probably. I'll talk to their parents." It wasn't much, but it was something. Hargrove's visit sparked a ripple. Neighbors started whispering about the vandalism, some in disapproval, others in defense. The Gazette ran a story about it, calling for civility. And Maggie used her coffee shop as a hub for support, putting up a sign, "All are welcome here." Lucas and I kept pushing. We organized a movie night at the community center, screening a documentary about queer history. Lily helped us make flyers, her shy smile growing bolder each day. 30 people showed up, more than we'd hoped, including Karen, the hardware store owner, and even Sheriff Hargrove, who stood at the back with his arms crossed but watched the whole thing. Afterward, a woman approached us, her face lined with years and worry. "My son's gay," she said quietly. "He left town years ago. I wish I'd done what you're doing." She handed us a donation for the next event, her hands trembling. Lucas hugged her, and I saw tears in his eyes. But every step forward came with a pushback. Dawson's group started a petition to protect family values, circulating it at the church. Flyers appeared around town, calling us outsiders trying to ruin Willow Creek. One night, someone threw a brick through Maggie's shop window, shattering the glass and her sign. We cleaned up the mess together, Maggie's jaw set as she swept. "They're scared," she said. "That's all this is. Fear." "Then why does it feel like we're losing?" I asked, my voice breaking. Lucas took my hand, his grip steady. "We're not. Look at Lily. At Karen. At that woman from the movie night. We're reaching people. Ethan. That's what scares them." He was right, but it didn't make the fight easier. That night, we sat on my porch, sharing a beer in silence. I thought about Chicago, about the safety of anonymity, and wondered if I'd made a mistake staying. But then Lucas leaned against me, his warmth grounding me, and I knew I couldn't leave. Not him. Not this. The next morning, Lily showed up with a plan. "I want to start a club at school," she said. "For kids like me. Will you help?" I looked at Lucas, who nodded, his eyes bright with pride. "Let's do it," I said. We spent the day drafting a proposal for the school board, Lily's enthusiasm infectious. It felt like planting a seed, fragile but full of promise. But as we worked, a text came from Maggie, "Church meeting tonight. Dawson's rallying. You need to be there." My stomach dropped. Another fight. Another chance to lose everything. Lucas squeezed my hand. "We've got this," he said. "Together." We walked into the church that night, heads high, hearts pounding. Dawson stood at the pulpit, his petition in hand, preaching to a crowd of familiar faces. But this time, we weren't alone. Maggie, Sarah, Lily, Karen, and a dozen others stood with us. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like we might win. The church was packed, the air thick with tension and the faint smell of polished wood. Dawson stood at the pulpit, his voice booming as he waved his petition like a weapon. "This town has values," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd, landing on Lucas and me. "We won't let outsiders tear that apart." I felt Lucas stiffen beside me, but he didn't look away. Maggie, Sarah, Lily, Karen, and a handful of others stood with us at the back, their presence a quiet strength. I thought of the journal, of Lucas's confession, of Caleb's courage, and found my own voice. "We're not outsiders," I said, stepping forward. My voice echoed, unsteady but clear. We're your neighbors. Your friends. Your family. The room went silent. Every eye on me. Dawson's face reddened. But before he could speak, Lily stepped up. I'm 16, she said, her voice trembling but fierce. I'm gay, and I'm tired of being afraid in my own town. You don't get to decide who I am. Karen, her mother, put an arm around her, tears streaming down her face. I'm proud of my daughter, she said, and I'm ashamed I didn't stand up sooner. One by one, others spoke. The woman from the movie night, the hardware store owner, even Sheriff Hargrove, who said, I've got a job to do, and that's to protect everyone here. Everyone. Dawson's petition faltered, his crowd shrinking as people whispered, some leaving, others nodding at us. It wasn't a full victory. Hate doesn't vanish in a single night, but it was a turning point. The Gazette reported the meeting as a step toward unity, and Lily's school club was approved the next week, with 10 kids signing up on the first day. Lucas and I kept building. We hosted more event potlucks, book clubs, open mic nights, each one drawing a bigger crowd. Maggie's shop became a safe haven, her new sign reading, Love is welcome here. The vandalism stopped, though Dawson's glares didn't. But for every glare, there was a smile, a handshake, a quiet thank you from someone we'd reached. One evening, as summer faded into fall, Lucas and I sat on my porch, the journal resting between us. You changed everything, I said, my voice soft. That knock on my door, it was the start of all this. He shook his head, his hand finding mine. You changed it, Ethan. You stayed. You fought. He paused, his eyes searching mine. I love you. The words hit me like a wave, warm and overwhelming. I'd been afraid to say them, afraid of what they'd mean in a town like this. But looking at Lucas, at the life we were building, I wasn't afraid anymore. I love you, too, I said, and kissed him, the porch light casting our shadows across the lawn. Willow Creek wasn't perfect. There were still whispers, still fights to come. But we'd carved out a space for ourselves, for Lily, for anyone who needed it. The journal, once a confession of pain, was now a story of hope, a reminder that truth, even when it shocks, can heal. As we sat there, hand in hand, I thought of Caleb, of the teenage girl's note, of every small victory we'd won. Lucas's knock on my door had been a spark, and together, we'd lit a fire. It wasn't just about us, Anna Maria, it was about a town learning to love better, and a world we were determined to change, one heart at a time.